Good evening, everyone. We're so excited to have you here with us for this month's uh, club members tasting for the 39th, hard to believe, Ancient Wines Club. This is Cubase and Conquest, the wines of Alexander the Great. So we were really excited about this topic because A, it's been on our list for a long, long time. We did an original kind of back in the early days of the club. We did a kind of an abbreviated version of this, but we've been wanting to revisit. And then seemed particularly timely because we're going to be going this year, actually in 2 weeks. Also kind of shocking, 2 weeks to Greece to take some Ancient Wines Club members around. Macedon, basically the region of northern Greece where Alexander the Great hails from. So it's a really kind of neat way for us to explore the region and its wines before we head over there ourselves. So it's a little bit selfish in that regard too, because we got to kind of check out some of the towns that we might want to see and some of the vineyards and whatnot. So um, we'll as usual, we'll take questions at the end. We're gonna kind of keep it light tonight on the content. Just we have a lot in the write-ups if you have an opportunity to look at those, but we will save some time at the end if you have any questions that come up or anything when you're reading along, when you were tasting the wines before, you're like, I want to know more about this. Just ask us at the end, or as always, shoot it into the chain, the chat or whatever, if that sounds good. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan is going to take us through this first line here.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jeff. Um, so for the first wine here, we'll be looking at the 2021 Enops Opla Red. So this is the blend from northern Greece. However, actually, I think there's also some of the grapes are from Drama in Thrace, and then some of the grapes are actually from Thessaly as well, a bit farther south in this case. So you have kind of a multi-region blend, which I'll talk about after I kind of walk through the wine. But the three grapes are Xinomavro, Lignona, and Mavruti. Um, the grape Xinomavro, best known in the Nausa region, Lignona, also from the kind of Thessaly region as well, and also in Thrace. And then Mavruti, which you see also kind of basically starting in Thessaly and going north as well. So this is a pretty approachable red, definitely designed to be fresh, kind of juicy, fun, lively, and really again like designed by the winemaker Nikos. His name is Nikos Karatsas. To be kind of like a entry point, if you will, to some of these northern red Greek wines that are a little bit more they have a little more structure, a little more acidity than let's say maybe some of the southern Greek wines from Greek reds, I should say, from like Nemea, where you some of those like softer, more fruity, plush sort of wines. Sometimes when they're younger, especially. But yeah, in particular, this wine for me showed a lot of that kind of like bright red fruits, a lot of the kind of the cranberries, the cherries, the kind of baskets of sort of summer orchard fruits, if you will. And then I really love a little. There's a little floral tinge to it as well that from my notes, and I think I put this in the write up, but like it had this like Chianti Classico, Chianti Rufina kind of like Tuscan element, and not again, it's its own thing. Like, as we kind of always say, you can compare it, but people are probably a lot more familiar with Chianti wines than they are with multi-region Northern Greek red blends. So having that kind of like sort of reference point in your for your palate, I think is always good. And it's some people can kind of get a little can bristle sometimes at being compared or having their wines compared or always comparing wines to something that might be more familiar, especially if we're a little bit farther afield. But honestly, for me, I think it's always been very, very helpful because when you start blind tasting wines, and it can get actually pretty challenging to say, oh, is this a Greek red, or is this an Italian red, or is this even like a Southern French red? And it's not about getting it right, but it's about getting closer to what you like. And so, understanding where your wheelhouse is really, I think, why that kind of reference game for me is helpful. So yeah, so this kind of Chianti-like blend here. that's again, I think it has just a lot of like really, really lovely freshness to it. And like I said before, I want to comment very briefly about the kind of multi-regional aspect. This is something we're starting to see more in Europe as wines, and I should say wine growing regions experience effects of climate change as they go through um, seasons that they've never experienced before. You're having winemakers who are being faced with the fact that, the growing conditions are changing, and so you're seeing wines be made in some cases from multiple countries in the EU, but in this case from multiple regions. And this is a picture here of Drama up in Thrace in the north of some vineyards. They're not actually from these particular vineyards. They didn't have any photos of the vineyard that this wine was from, but so you can kind of get the sense here of these kind of like rolling hills, definitely kind of like, dotted with trees, but it's definitely a little bit cooler in the north than in the south typically. So you can kind of, let's say you got a really hot, you know, growing season in one region, you could kind of buffet that with grapes from another region that are a little bit more, you know, maybe a little bit brighter or have a little more structure because they're from a higher elevation or something like that. So again, like this is something we're going to see probably more of from I would expect almost every wine growing region in the world. Probably especially more around that kind of traditional wine growing band of latitude. So that's as there's adapting to where the climate is going. These kind of multi-regional sort of decisions are definitely, and multi-vintage. We've seen some multi-vintage wines, obviously, as well, come a little bit more into fashion. Yeah, and just overall, though, I think a really fun, lovely, fresh red that kind of like is emblematic of a easygoing sort of bistro wine. Did you guys get a chance to try this one? What did you guys think about this?
Yeah,
I know T's tried it because we tasted it together.
yeah. I mean, just to add to what Ryan's saying, and especially with the heat being summer and just heat waves across the U.S. and especially on the East Coast, I would recommend having chilling this wine a little bit as well. Just cellar temperature. I'm having it right now, and I'm thinking, oh, I would probably like a little chill on it to get it down to cellar temperature. So. My recommendation is just, especially if you're in a warm area, just put it in your fridge for 20 to 25 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, again, we talk about that a lot, but I think chilling a red is almost always a good idea, especially in the warmer months. But even in the colder months, sometimes that's actually kind of the right move as well to sort of bring out some of that freshness.
It's it's literally on my notes for the chauffeur as well, right? I mean, I think it says a lot about kind of where we're at and July being upon us, but also yeah, I mean yeah, great points, and this is also yeah, these would be delicious, and I haven't had a chance to try this one, and I'm sold. So looking forward to
Yeah,
later
yeah,
on this
That a
Fourth of
lot
July
with
weekend cracking that thing. Yeah.
yeah, we say that a lot, right? With the whites, often the whites are served too cold, and then the reds are served too warm, right? Just in terms of,
yeah.
it depends on the white, but a lot of that happens a lot. Oh, right,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
mixture.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just because I think I forgot to mention it earlier, like this wine is, it's done in stainless steel, like again, made to be fresh, like from the get-go. So yeah, the idea is kind of carried through very well. I think we'll see more of these types of wines. So, um,
So
cool.
I mean, we're just gonna keep it really tight tonight on the content from about Alexander, but we thought it would be nice for you to have a map here. This map also appears in the write-ups, but just to give you a sense of where Thrace is, where that the Ryan was just the wine we just tasted is from Thrace here to the north of Macedon. Thrace has come up a lot, right, in our conversations over the years, just because it's the theoretical home of Dionysus, right? So this kind of on the periphery of the civilized Greek world. But Macedon as well, right, was a real outlier. Wasn't part of the kind of group of Greek city states, the polis that we often that we think about when we think about ancient Greece. So Sparta, Athens, Corinth, Thebes, all of those places. Many of which we visited over the last couple of years. But really comes into the scene here under Philip II. So I think 359 is when he takes power in Macedon. And his lineage goes back, mythologically to Heracles, who was the subject of our last two clubs. So there's this kind of mythological, hero idea that comes into play with Philip and then particularly with Alexander. So Philip had seven wives famously, and one of them was Olympias of Epirus, which is down here. Melissa, you can see it on the map here. And this just one quick story about Philip. He went blind in one eye, so the kind of traditional line, right, was that he was wounded in battle and the eye became infected and he lost it. But the more colorful version of the story is that he came into his bedroom one night to visit with Olympias, and she was lying next to a snake, a ginormous snake. And so Dana can talk about this a little bit later on, but we know from the later kind of mythology of Alexander himself that he created that he reckoned that he had been son of Zeus, who had visited Olympia and snake. So how does that connect to the blindness? Well, you're not supposed to view a god, right? When you're immortal. But that's kind of these stories refashioned, right, to fit the kind of the later mythology of Alexander.
Mhm.
We'll kind of leave it there in terms of just gives you a sense here of kind of where we are on the map, and then where Alexander comes into he's the son of Philip II, and Olympias. So with that, we're just going to move into the second wine here. This is the wine I actually have in front of me. I was really excited to see the guys pick this out because this vineyard, the Emeopolis Vineyards, was as far as I recall, my very first introduction to a Sonoma Bro that I really fell in love with, and that was the Young Vines, which we used to sell at Vine Street, in which I mean it must have been in two or three different AWG events over the years when we used to do those fundraisers. Just such a fantastic kind of entry level Sonoma Bro. This is definitely not an entry level wine. This is to me at least, a very serious, elegant kind of wine that you could put away for many, many years potentially. Rapsani, Ryan, I'm not sure if Urania got back to you on whether or not we're gonna actually be able to visit this town or not, but it's on our wish list for our trip in a couple of weeks. Little mountain town. This overlooks actually Mount Olympus, so we're literally drinking the wine of the gods here. Really, in the shadow of Olympus. I think on our schedule we have a barbecue lunch overlooking Mount Olympus. So hopefully the gods oblige and it's not cloudy that day. So in this wine, you have a really interesting mix. So Ryan already spoke a little bit about the Sonoma Madro, which is it's the most famous, most widely planted red grape in northern Greece. But you have two others here, Crasato, which is really, as far as I understand, is like the heart of this very small PDO Rapsani. It's a heavier, kind of richer, denser wine with they do with a lot of extraction. And then Stavrato is a kind of a less serious wine, but or grape, but the requirement is that in Rapsani you have to have at least 1/3 Sino Mavro, 1/3 Crasato, and then the rest can be whatever percentage I think it has to be 15% has to be Stavrato. So that's kind of what they went with here on the minimum. So I think this one's 50% Sino Mavro, 35 Crasato, and then 15 Stavrato. So yeah, it's just a really cool wine. We have a picture of the vineyards here. Yeah, steep slope. Yeah, I mean, Pinot Noir is a pretty hard grape to work with. It's a lot like I think kind of Pinot Noir or Nebbiolo just requires very specific terroir and careful handling, low yield and whatnot. Yeah, this wine we often had this happen in blind tastings, right? That it's very easy to confuse a good Pinot Noir for a Barolo or Barbaresco, like a really good well-made, aged Nebbiolo. And the color, uh, this one I haven't had a chance to look at it too carefully, but you will notice if you open a wine at at Sonoma Bro. I'm not sure actually how much the Crassato affects that actually. But generally, if you have a Sonoma Bro, you'll notice like the edges of it turning orange very, very quickly, even after a couple of years. So it's just a wine that loses its kind of the intensity of its color, but develops all these amazing secondary, tertiary characteristics just after time in oak and then time in the bottle. So I think typically, you guys can correct me, but I think typically they're not released until like 2 years after.
Yeah, that's
I
I think
don't
that's right. Yeah.
This one spends 14 months in oak as well. So it's got a lot of time to mature before it even gets to the market. So yeah, I mean you guys wrote this up really well in the write-up, but I love the combination of like just leathery qualities. You had like tart huckleberry, I think, in there. This kind of light red fruit, but then there's a kind of intensity to the flavor. A lot of yeah, like a lot of like forest floor, and I love this wine. I drink this.
So Jeff, we actually drank this wine. I think the first time we drank this wine was the first time we went to Greece, actually. And I remember we drank it in a wine bar, I think. And I remember just thinking like, wow, damn, an appellation I've never had before from a winery that I love. And it was probably the first Rapsani that I've ever had. But it's definitely yeah, I remember tasting it and I was like, damn, we got to get this in the club. I hope this is, I hope this is available. And I think, immediately went and looked and like, okay, yes, it was potentially available, but then, we weren't doing Greek Greek wines, or in the area or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but anyways, we've been wanting to get this wine, and I think, T and I have talked about this wine many times. We've been trying to get this wine for years, so I'm super excited to have gotten in the club. And yeah, like you said, like there's like kind of like there's a depth to it. Obviously, like mountainous appellations always give a little bit of that color. You can get a little bit more of that intensity. And it's the actual town of Repsani is a very very small town, but the appellation, like you said, is kind of this like slopes of Mount Olympus in the shadow of. Yeah, apparently like that the Cresato grape is really kind of like that's like the one that it's like they're really proud of. Stavroto apparently is like a little bit it's grown more a little bit farther south, but also if they have to leave one out, they'll leave out the Stavroto, in terms of like other local wines. So, but yeah, very very excited to get to go check this area out. And just as like a kind of like a point to hit on again is like it's high elevation, it's mountainous, it gets cold, it snows up there. And this is something that a lot of people imagine Greece and they think of sunny beaches and Santorini, and they think of hot hot hot. And yeah, it can definitely get hot here, like in any part of Greece, but those big temperature swings, like those are the region, the regions that actually can make wines that retain acidity, despite having, maybe warm days. But once that wind starts kicking up at night or something like that and blowing out that heat, you get really compelling wines. Like think like Northern Rhone as well. Like it can snow across the Northern Rhone, but you can make wines but it also can be crazy, crazy hot. But that wind that blows through just keeps things really compelling. So yeah, it should be really interesting.
Yeah, great acidity, great tannin. I mean, it's all really well balanced, in my opinion. And again, we've talked about this a lot too, but just the age worthiness of this kind of wine. I mean, you could set this aside for many years and come back and
Yeah.
something extremely interesting out of it. So drinks
Yeah, I
well
would.
as well. It's what is it, 5 years now? So
Yeah,
2020.
it's at 2020, so it's like, it's pretty still pretty young. I mean, Sonoma Bro, I think definitely has the most aging potential of like Greek reds, kind of at a baseline, I would say, of especially the well-known Greek reds. Obviously that Nebbiolo connection that kind of always gets thrown around, very much, makes sense. You have that like high acid, high tannin sort of structure, but yeah, it just drinks so nicely, kind of at any age.
Yeah.
So yeah. Very excited to go visit them as well.
Yeah, I can't wait. So I just wanted to throw this up here, and we won't chat about it for too long, but this was actually was the heading of our club this month. This is the famous Alexander mosaic, which was found. This has originally probably over 2 million pieces of little tesserae. Unbelievable, like about 2 millimeters across. If you can imagine the amount of labor that went into to making the mosaic. It was found in the House of the Faun in Pompeii, in which the eruption 79 C preserved the mosaic. It was found in the 19th century. It's now in the Archaeological Museum of Naples. But what's really interesting about this, I mean, everything about this is very interesting, but is that it's almost certainly a copy of a Greek original painting, like a wall painting, right, on plaster, from either from the very end of Alexander's lifetime or very shortly after he died. So it's really hard, with a lot of these figures to pin down exactly what they look like. So this one is thought to be as close to a lifelike representation of Alexander as we can get. Probably by the painter Apelles. So again, a contemporary of Alexander. So it's pretty cool. It represents the Battle of Issus. Probably there's debate about that as well. And this is Darius the third here of Persia. So these guys are meeting. Whether or not they actually met quite so close in the battle, I'm not sure. But you can just, I mean, most of you watching this have probably seen some ancient art before, but I mean, it just baffles the mind, the level of detail and just like how long it would take to put something like this together, and also just to copy a wall painting. Just one last thought on this. It is thought that because the reason that the top of the scene is so empty is that because if this were on a wall, right, it would have been kind of out of the line of sight of somebody looking at it. So you wouldn't have painted this, and then if this is an exact replica of a wall painting, of course it's on the floor in Pompeii. You wouldn't, right? You're not going to put something in there that wasn't in the original. So anyway, pretty cool. I think it dates to. I think most people agree it dates to sometime in the last decade or so of the 2nd century, about 200 years after Alexander's death. Yeah,
It's really good. It's a really good point, Jeff, about the sort of compositional techniques and that being an indication of it being a painting and not a mosaic. I'm thinking of some of the mosaics that we've seen in Lod and places that we've excavated. And then also, those of you who are going to be coming with us to Pella this summer, keep your eyes open. We'll be seeing the pebble mosaics there too. So that'll be really exciting.
Yeah, you can't see really the Greek side of the battle very well. It's not preserved, but one of the things we talked about quite a bit quite a bit, I mean, probably one sentence or two sentences, but relatively speaking, in the write-up was just the innovation of Philip of the Sarissa, right? Which is when he fought the Macedonians were fighting the Thebans as they were first kind of basically conquering Greece before they launched an invasion of Asia under Alexander. They ran into the Thebans who had these, I think they were like 15 or 12 foot long or something like that spears, but they were so and the Macedonians were like, well, we don't know what to do with this. So they created, Philip basically was responsible for creating this the phalanx, right? So they had these guys go into battle adjacent to each other with one person protecting the next, but they, like the Greeks did, but they used really light shields and then these massive like 20-foot spears, so they could reach farther than the enemies, and they could hold them with two hands because they just had like a light shield on one arm. So it was a revolutionary development. I mean, it was unstoppable essentially. Definitely in Greece, and then even when they got to Asia, overwhelming. And there were tactics and whatnot involved too, but yeah. So it's kind of, I just mentioned that because we don't really see that part of it on the mosaic because that part's not preserved. So yeah, cool. I was in the National Museum of Naples 2 summers ago, and this thing is under reconstruction. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to see the original.
No.
Just a carpet that looks
That's
like
really. They put a carpet out. That's hilarious.
It's very realistic, but it's not the original. So
it's like when you're traveling in Europe and they have the screens that look like exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously
Notre Dame. Yeah.
it was exactly that. It was like the scream.
It is kind of miraculous that Alexander's face survived, considering
Yeah, it is.
the fact and also not just this as well, right? So we talk about that a little bit in the club as well.
With that, we'll move on to a bit further afield here. With T's going to talk about this wine from Armenia, which these are the first two wines we've ever had from Armenia in the club, right, T? So
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's what's really exciting about these wines is, well, first of all, like, we debate over which area has the first winemaking tradition, but Armenia wine goes all the way back to the Bronze Age, um, and uh, and we're so excited to like bring this wine because due to civil conflicts in Armenia, um, first of all, you couldn't get Armenian wines for decades, and second, when Armenian wines were being made, they were using international varieties like Syrah or Grenache, because they thought that would be able to sell them to international market. But just like a lot of countries, just like Greece, Armenia now is um, focusing on their traditions and indigenous varieties. So this is a grape that Voskehat, which is known. First of all, it's a region. It's actually a village about 12 miles north of the capital. Two, its name, it's an indigenous varieties that is translated to golden berries, and it's been cultivated in Armenia since the Bronze Age, basically. And it's this young winemaker, Amy, she just started this winery in 2017. And so she wants to revive these indigenous varieties and showcase them to the world. And this is done in stainless steel tanks and then aged in neutral oak barrels, just to soften it. And this wine is, I think, really pretty. A great summer wine. I get notes of like yellow pear and apple and a little bit of citrus, but a little bit of like that lees aging, that lees stirring that gives us a little bit of texture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually haven't had a chance to try this wine yet, see, but I'm like, I think I haven't been this excited about a wine in a while, just because it's, it'll be the first time I've had a white from, I think it'll be the first time I've had a white wine from Armenia. And like we can't underscore enough like how difficult it's been to get wines from this country, which for us, the ancient wine guys, like with the Arini one cave, like cave complex, which Dana will talk about briefly
Yeah.
in a moment. Like this has been such a place that has just been our
Oh yeah.
like albatross. We have not been able to get anything, and so we're so excited that one, we're able to get it for this club like in the near term, but also that the market is opening. There are a few importers, one named Storica Wines that I think last year, maybe 2 years ago, they were just in New York. They've now moved west, and are now just distributing here in California. But again, like this is something that's happened in the last couple of years. The Armenian government is just now kind of getting their stuff together to sort of like support these types of initiatives and these types of international commercial stuff. And the stuff that we saw, I have had Armenian wines before. And I have had an Armenian white wine before, but like they're international varieties. I had like a Chardonnay like in the past. I've had Armenian Cab in the past, and it wasn't very good, and I didn't even hardly remember it, and it wasn't really worth working with because they were just being made for export. Kind of this sort of like I don't know, like time period where they're just looking for things that they can kind of make money on, which understandable. But now that you have all these autochthonous varieties that are indigenous varieties that are basically being rediscovered for their value. In this case, Bosquehat, which, as I understand it, some of there's vines that are over 150 years old that are still in production. They probably make like a handful of grapes a year, but they are still producing grapes. But yeah, I'm just so excited. It's going to be kind of like a watch this space sort of thing moment for Armenian wines probably over the next 10 years, and they're going to probably, it's going to be very similar to like what Georgian wines did here, hopefully, probably on a much smaller scale because there's way less land under cultivation in Armenia. There's one major region called Vayot Zor, where this is from. That's like basically they're like, the center of great cultivation for commercial quantities. But yeah, I'm just like, I can't stress enough how like, amazing it is to have Armenian wine on our shores. So,
I
yes,
think Right, I think both of our wines are from Viatzor, and I think
exactly.
this might be
Yeah.
a perfect thing to consider for a few ancient wine guys visit. So we'll bookmark that and
I was actually in touch
keep an
with
eye on the space. Yeah.
I was in touch with the folks there, the Historica a couple of years ago, and they were like, "Yeah, we're just getting stuff together." And I was talking about the trip that the trips that we were planning for Greece, and they were like, "Well, we could get in touch with the Armenian Wine Board, and like we could potentially get you guys over here and like plan it out." And it was like one of those things where we were trying to do too many things at once, and so couldn't quite rally everything up for it. But there definitely is opportunity there, and there's definitely I'm sure they have like funding and all that kind of stuff if we put together a proposal. So something that we could definitely look at for the future as far as, kind of putting together something special there. But yeah, for the time being, like you said, like, they're kind of working with one region and you know, we're loving the wines so far, it sounds like.
Cutting edge.
Sorry?
We're on the cutting edge.
Oh yeah, absolutely we are. Yeah.
Let us know, club members. We'll
Yeah.
set up a
I
tour for
mean,
you.
it's such just a cool region, and there's so much potential here.
It's from so the a lot of the soils are volcanic, and so you have a lot of like ungrafted vines they're like pre-phylloxera ungrafted vines and vineyards there. So you have lots of like 100-year-old vineyards that are just kind of like hanging out. So I'm sure there's going to be this kind of hopefully Armenian wine renaissance. Unfortunately, Vayat Zor is also very close to like Nagorno-Karabakh and like the Azerbaijan border, where they've had a lot of like border conflicts and basically war over the last multiple decades. So it is an area similar to like Lebanon's Bekaa Valley that has an amazing history, but is unfortunately kind of sandwiched between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. So there's definitely I don't think there's quite as many issues there in Valley, but there's definitely it's not far, so it's always kind of a concern.
Yeah, and the last thing is Zulal, the name of the winery means pier in Armenian, and so they're focusing on indigenous varieties. They don't not bringing in international varieties, so
Yeah,
which is
it's so
a
cool.
really cool project.
It's so great. It's so great, and the fact that it like ties into our periphery of Alexander's empire also makes it just that much better. We'll be keeping an eye on this space and also keeping all of you informed. It's great. Should we continue a little bit with our journey? I can touch in on sort of what we talked about in the club. Again, you can always go back to the write-ups, but Alexander, as Jeff was saying, right, makes great use of Philip's phalanx and really creates a fundamental war machine in Macedon, and begins to expand into the eastern regions. He very quickly makes his way across into the modern day Turkey, and the goal of Alexander's entire sort of approach is to essentially create local bases of power, exploit those resources, build up troops, and then continue his move eastward as he expands his empire. So we see Alexander employing all kinds of military tactics. His brilliance is still studied in war colleges today. not just the phalanx, but for example, when he attacks the city of Tyre, which is on the eastern Mediterranean, right? Tyre was situated on an island. And so, in order to besiege the city, Alexander actually creates a connection between the island and the shore that still exists today. So, if you actually Google and take a look at the image of Tyre, you'll see that land bridge that Alexander created so that he could push his siege engines across and actually topple the walls of Tyre. Um, Alexander was, renowned by historians for his brilliance, but also kind of reviled for his cruelty. He enforced all of this via putting all the men to the sword and essentially selling women and children into slavery. It was a tough way to build empire, but then once peace had been established, he would try to tie in to these local communities. And Egypt was his ultimate goal at this point as he made his way down the eastern Mediterranean coast. Gaza stood in the way. Gaza was a formidable, fortified area, and it actually resisted Alexander for several years. He was actually besieging Gaza. Battus was the satrap, the Persian satrap that essentially put against him. And Alexander was so frustrated by this, but by the time he actually was able to crush Gaza and crush its walls, it was a fortified settlement on top of a hill. He took Battus and he actually tied him to his chariot and dragged him around the city several times until he died. Which those of you who are kind of following, as Jeff said, Alexander saw himself in the footsteps not only of these great mythological characters, having that tie through Philip to Heracles, but his idol was Achilles. We have to keep in mind that Alexander really was kind of a trust fund kid. I mean, he did grow up with a tremendous amount of privilege. He was educated by Aristotle, along with all of his, companions who became his generals. And then after the empire fell, squabbled amongst themselves and set up shop in Egypt, different places. People like Ptolemy. Anyway, it's so Alexander really saw himself as this this heroic figure. This journey was one that was of conquest, but also sort of personal growth and is establishing his own mythology. So he saw himself as Achilles, and those of you who remember your Iliad, Achilles when Troy fell, Achilles actually took Hector and tied him to the back of his chariot and dragged him around the walls of Troy. So it was a very emblematic thing for him to do. He doesn't have really too much trouble in Egypt. He makes his way in there, and the Egyptians had already been sort of buckling under Persian rule, so he was more or less welcomed as a conqueror. And what you see here in this image, this is an image from Karnak in which Alexander, this is a Ptolemaic, so a much later depiction of this scene, but it's Alexander, I should say it's not Ptolemaic, it's actually Hellenistic, but he kind of bridges the gap. He's actually supplanting himself and making offerings to the god Amun. And this harkens back to an episode that also ties into that narrative of Alexander's, sort of coming into his own narrative, his own sense of divinity. Am I actually, divine? Is Zeus actually my father via the snake, as Jeff was talking about, right? And his mother. Alexander makes his way far out to the west into the Siwa Oasis and consults an oracle there, the temple of Amun. And he is told by those priests, who are probably under duress, that not only is he the son of Zeus or Amun, right? There's a lot of synergistic overlapping of gods at this time, and would continue under the later Hellenistic period under the Ptolemies. But he's told that he's also the pharaoh of Egypt, and he is now, ruler incarnate. So those of you who might be, considering a trip out to Siwa, it's beautiful. It's an incredibly long drive, but if you're going there to see the Temple of Amun, it is absolutely tiny and unremarkable. It's like, when you go to see the Temple of Tutankhamun, it's kind of small, and that's why it wasn't discovered and why it exists, and and so forth. So just a spoiler alert: if you do find yourself in Siwa, there's a lot to see, totally recommend going. But the Temple of Amun, where Alexander was actually crowned king and essentially deified, is a little bit of a downer. So with that, we'll kind of continue moving on with our wines. Oh my goodness, it's me. Okay, all right. I guess that's me. I'm talking about the chauffeur. Are we on 4 already? Wow. So as Ryan was saying and T was saying, we're really excited to be working with these Armenian wines. I'm particularly excited about this wine, which is the 2020 Chauffeur Arini. Arini might actually spark a couple of bells for those of you who have been with us since the beginning, because we've been talking about the Arini complex, which is in Armenia and is officially the world's oldest winery. This is an area that is, when we talk about like wine domestication, Georgia and Armenia have this back and forth with regards to like who did what first and when was winemaking started, and but really Armenia racks up a lot of the firsts in this contest. We talk about grape domestication in the Fertile Triangle of the South Caucasus between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. This is where domestication took place, and our first evidence of this really is like from 8,000 years ago, and it is in Armenia. Wineries and winemaking are a different thing, though, right? So there's domestication of growing crops, but then there's actually like making wine, pressing the juice, fermenting it, doing the whole 9 yards. And really, that's where Arini 1, the site that was excavated by UCLA back in 2007, shines. That is a remarkable space, because in these caves there's a full pressing platform where you can actually see where folks would trod on the grapes, and everything would be shunted down into a giant ceramic vessel, and that is like similar to the Qvevri, right, that we see in Georgia. So it's absolutely winemaking, 100%. And it's actually interesting. The site is also famous, speaking of stomping, for having the world's oldest leather shoe, which also dates back to 4,100. So not to correct T, but this is one of the only chances, because we talk about wine, and the great thing about having such wonderful wine experts like T, who can step in and correct me. So T, it's not Bronze Age. It actually is the late Chalcolithic, believe it or not. It's even earlier than the Bronze Age that winemaking has this history in places like Georgia, places like Armenia. So anyway, just splitting hairs.
It's good to have a leather shoe when you're going to step on a colleague.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, just splitting hairs because I can. But yeah, no, T's absolutely right. 6,000 years plus of actual wine in this area. And this wine particularly is really, really cool. I'm going to give myself a little bit more of a splash here. This comes to us from the same location Ryan was mentioning before, the store. And the grape itself is called Arini. There have been genetic tests on this wine. The issue is, the only thing that we get out of the archaeological sites that are this old from the late Chalcolithic are essentially tartaric acid, and we get the grape pips themselves. So it's very tough to do like DNA analysis on that sort of archaeological data or those remains. But when we consider that this wine has been made in the region, this is an autochthonous varietal that goes back as far as written history is concerned. There's very good reason to think that this grape has a connection that maybe was continuously cultivated over the last 6,000 years. So, so that's a really hell of a thing to think about when you're opening this bottle and having a sip of it. That you really are having history in a glass that goes back that far. And the wine is a beautiful, beautiful wine. I won't, Ryan and T have done a beautiful job talking about the wine of Armenia. This Arini grape is no exception. It's a light-bodied grape that just absolutely has just wonderful qualities. I would chill this in a heartbeat. It's vinified in large steel stainless tanks, comes from century-old vines that are, again, high elevation. So despite heat, less heat in Armenia, compared to Greece, but also you're getting that wonderful acidity. I think this is just an absolutely delicious, delicious wine. T wrote the notes on this: bright cranberry, crushed blueberry, plum. I got cola and spiced notes as well. This is just a crowd pleaser, and we'll go with just about anything, even with its storied history of going back 6,000 years. So again, super excited about this wine. Really, really special and super fun. So we could leave it there.
Nina, what do we pair with? Orion P.
Some pairings. I mean,
Yeah,
I
let's do
mean,
some pairings. What do you think?
I think this is a 4th of July wine, you know. Speaking of 4th of July, I think,
Totally.
it has a little, tasting it again now, I'm getting some more savory notes that I didn't get initially when I tasted it. But I mean, like sausages, grilled squash, that kind of thing.
You know what I made last night, T? I made galbijin, right? So you're doing like Korean pork, like spare ribs, and the fat on it. And I'm thinking back on just the gristly, delicious fat, and paired with this acidity and brightness, and any meats. It's making me hungry just sitting here.
it's it definitely like I think it's kind of designed to be a pretty approachable, like a versatile one, I would say. This it's a project that's put together by the importer, as I understand it as well. Like they're looking for wines that I should say crafting wines intentionally to kind of be able to fill these roles in obviously in their market, but also to kind of show what these grapes can do. In this case, Arini Noir, which I think there is a white Arini variety as well. Which is named after the village. I don't know if they're actually related, the Noir and the white variety, but I love the label and like the chauffeur, which is like literally means like chauffeur. It's a taxi, and it's like got the Lada car in the front. Like,
Yeah.
it's I love the implied message that it's gonna get you there.
It's
Like
gonna
no
get you
matter
there.
no matter
I'm
what, it's gonna
pretty
get you
sure.
there.
I am pretty sure that when we were in Georgia, that Jeff and T and I rode in a Lada cab that had been modified when we were trying to get all the way out to Kakheti, that had been modified with a natural gas, sort of like thing that was a. It was so sketchy that the driver actually made us get out of the car before he was able to refuel it for safety reasons. So that Lada brings back some memories for sure.
They make a rosé as well. T, did you taste the rosé version of this? Because I saw that they also have that in the lineup too, and I'm
Oh,
very curious to try that.
yeah, I did. I wasn't able to taste that with the rep.
Yeah,
But I mean, I think it's exciting because Storica Wines is bringing like indigenous varieties
yeah,
to the West Coast now, and so like it gives us a lot of options for future
yeah,
clubs with
yeah.
Armenian wines that are interesting, really interesting.
I can only imagine that the amount, the quantity and quality is only going to go up from my judgment. Same thing we've seen in other Eastern European countries that are kind of either coming out from the veil of or the I don't know the oppressive thumb, if you will, of Soviets collectivization or whatever it was that or that's been sort of suppressing wine advancing. But yeah, I think the future is very bright here. I mean, I think we have definitely a lot of club material that we could that we could come through with once we start seeing the books. The books will fill up with Armenian wine, hopefully sooner than later. I really hope that it can expand. There's also a film that was made by the SOM, like SOMM, the SOM movies or SOM films crew called Cup of. Do you remember what it is, Jeff? I feel like we talked about it. It's like Cup of.
Yeah,
Um,
Oh yeah, cup of. Oh, I
Cup of
totally.
Salvation. It's
There you
called
go,
Cup of
salvation.
Salvation.
Yeah.
And that is a film that was made, I think, actually about it was about Armenian wine, but then I actually haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I'm inspired to hopefully watch it the next week or so. I think there's also a story in there about either Kurdish or Iranian wine as well, where that across the border. So again, like this is a region that there's so much history for wine, but obviously lots of it has been suppressed for various reasons and fell out of favor. Or in the case of Turkey, where you have like huge amounts of vineyards that are like they're used to make not wine basically, and then so you have these old vines of indigenous varieties, like we would see with um, the Sevillin, the Narinsa, that gets used to make dolmas. They use the leaves, to make dolmas, but and then the grapes get used to make like other kind of non-wine grape products that you're going to start seeing probably a lot of vineyards, hopefully in some of these regions, be able to be making a little bit more commercialized wines. So yeah, I recently found there is a wine in Iraqi Kurdistan that's making wine, though they're not, it's just for local stuff. But yeah, I was extremely intrigued. The labels look terrible, but the the story sounds great. I messaged the guy on Instagram actually, and I was like, "What varieties are you planting?" He's just like, "I've got the red." And I was like, I've got the white. I was like, okay, that's the level we're at here.
There's one in between. We don't know what to call it yet.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So I mean, it's definitely something we're excited about. I mean, same as Greece. Greece is going through a renaissance, and has been in the last 40 years, really. And where the winemakers are saying, hey, we have a huge resource here I mean, from a marketing and business standpoint, obviously, where it's something very sellable. And then you have this, land that's obviously extremely viable for growing grapes. So, when they start looking for markets to be able to capture kind of some new value, Greece is obviously doing well. They're booming in terms of just getting international recognition and appreciation for it. But yeah, hoping Armenia follows close suit.
Yeah, I could totally, Armenia could totally, as Jeff mentioned, the battle between Georgia and Armenia for like who, had the first wine made.
That was
I
me,
mean,
baby.
Armenia can totally, go, as Georgian orange wine, or amber wine rather, has become popular in, hip bars in Manhattan. I can totally see Armenia going the same route.
Yeah. Or in hip bars in LA where there's a huge Armenian population. So
Yeah.
Right.
well, I think that's pretty much wraps things up. We did have this
You know,
beautiful
maybe just
I can
for it.
bring us home.
Tell us everything we need to know about Alexander in 1 minute.
The 30-second finish. I mean, we could tie it back to wine. Alexander, continues to chase Darius far into the east, just like in Egypt. He tries to set himself up in Babylon, where he establishes his administrative capital. Darius is on the run. He makes his way to Susa, and Alexander chases him, sacks the temple there. It's interesting if you ever look at like Neo-Assyrian reliefs. Susa is like this rich place. It's got all kinds of metals. Alexander cashes in, continues his fight towards Persepolis, burns the city. He regrets it. Darius is, essentially on the ropes, and is actually even killed by one of his own satraps. Alexander uses that as an excuse to expand continuously. He just keeps pushing as far as the Ganges until his men are just like, enough, and they make their way back to Babylon. Alexander, sort of is this period is a little bit of a dark period with a lot of drinking, and killing of friends. Even Cletus, his trusted one of his companions who actually saved his life, actually the brother of his nurse, ends up falling under Alexander's sword in a drunken fight. Their drinking contests. This guy Promachus dies after drinking 13 liters of wine. You can read all about it in the ancient sources. But Alexander himself is said to have been poisoned potentially. There's a lot of debate over the end of Alexander's life, but he dies incredibly young with all of these accomplishments under his belt. So we'll leave it at that. We'll raise a toast to Alexander and to all of you, who are coming with us to northern Greece to check out these routes, to experience these things, to try these wines in the flesh, to see these sites, it's always such a pleasure and a privilege to have this time with you guys, to be with you guys in the real world. And I think that's a great place to end it. So thanks for joining us. As always, please keep in mind that free shipping for up to 8 additional bottles to these locations. And yeah, I'm gonna start talking. Thanks, everybody.
Sorry to rush everybody. I mean, Dan and I both have like 1.5-year-olds. So
Yeah,
gotta
exactly.
Wrap it up.
I know. I got crying in the background right now too.
Cough. I don't know. Gotta wrap it up. But I think we covered most of the ground there, definitely in terms of the wine.
Yeah.
Some of this. If you have, don't hesitate to shoot us an email again. But if you want any additional wines, and if you have any questions about Alexander, yeah, and start getting excited about, if you're not coming on this year's trip, start getting excited about future trips. Some of the places we might be.
Armenia,
Georgia, other places in Greece.
Exactly.
The world is our oyster. So, yeah. So thanks so much, everybody. As always, it wouldn't happen without you. Whether you're signing on live or.
All right. Take
Cheers,
care,
everybody. Thank you again for everything. So cheers. See you next
Cheers,
time.
guys. See you next time.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.